Hello, Avatar fans, and welcome to the next episode of the Avatar Online podcast. This is going to be episode 208 of our regular shows, and we're recording this on the 1st of February 2020. This is the official podcast for the fan site, Avatar The Last Airbender Online.com, and I'm going to be your main host, Morgan Airspeed Prime. Joining me on the podcast is Greg2B from the site.
What's up, everyone?
Excellent. And today we're primarily going to be going just through a lot of news that's happened since the last podcast that we did about 2 weeks ago. And the main focus will be on the fact that one of those pieces of news is that we got preview pages for Runes of the Empire Part 3. And we'll kind of use that as a way for us to do our full, preview, final speculation before this book comes out. But we'll get into the news. A decent amount of stuff has actually happened. Some of the reveals we've been waiting for, but not all of them have happened since the last show. So we'll start off with probably one of the more exciting ones, and that is the full reveal here of the Legend of Korra Funko Pop. So prior to about a week and a bit ago, we knew these were coming in that we got the listings, just literally names in the database for which figures we were getting, and but at I think London Toy Fair, Funko revealed their whole kind of initial first half of the year 2020 waves, and Korra was part of that reveal. So we now know what our Korra wave is. So we have our sort of basic 4 and then 1 exclusive. So we have Korra, Mako, Asami, Amon, the names we knew from before, but then the kind of brand new one is the exclusive, and that is the Hot Topic exclusive Chase Korra. I think it's book 2 Korra, basically Avatar State Korra, and this is going to be like the Aang on air scooter from before. This is going to have a glow in the dark chase, and then there's going to be a standard version as well. So, very cool to see this revealed. And I suppose just initial thoughts, Greg. What were your thoughts on seeing these 5 as the wave revealed for Korra?
I think initially it's pretty cool. I mean, it's just cool to see that we're getting these, just in general. I think there's more characters that they can do, which is something people have been talking about, but just for seeing these, and I guess the sort of preview, not the sort of final real pieces, I think it's cool to actually get the concepts that they have going for them.
Yeah, it's definitely the kind of computer kind of mock-ups of them. It even says in the bottom of the main image, figure concept subject to licensor approval. But since they were showing them off publicly, it's all but confirmed, I suppose. So there might be some small changes before they release, but in general, this is going to be our look at the figures. So I suppose we'll just go through them kind of one by one, giving our thoughts on them. So we'll start with the standard Korra, and for me, I felt like they did with the Aang from the standard Aang from the Avatar ones. I think they really went all out on the main character here, in that the Aang had he came with Momo, he had the staff, he had the air effect part, and it was just the kind of perfect book 1 early Aang. And it feels like the same here. This is the perfect book 1 Korra that you'd want. She has an earth, water, and fire effect part, but no air, because of course she's learning it in book 1. Nice pose, and I think a lot of the details on the figure look really good. So what are your thoughts on the standard Korra?
I really like the standard one. I mean, I guess it's too bad that it is from the beginning, so there is no air in it. That would be cool if they could have put that in there. But no, regardless, I think that one's really cool. I think for me, I actually kind of like that one more than the other one. But no, it's definitely really cool.
Yeah, it's definitely the highlight. I think a lot of people are going to pick that one up. Next up, we have Mako, who's in his, of course, standard sort of book 1 outfit. The main sort of pose they have him here is just that he's holding sort of a flame in his hand, and he has one of his hands on his kind of waist. So, pretty good. I think you got the details right, and that the hair at the front, the unique eyebrows, the scarf, and so on. I think the details are really good on this. This is kind of exactly what you'd want from an early Mako. But what are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, no, I think as an early Mako concept is pretty much exactly what we remember from him in the beginning. But no, they did a pretty good job of sort of getting his essence in their sort of look that they have here. So no, I think for that one, it's pretty good actually.
Next up is Asami. And yeah, again, it's book one Asami, so it's her in her sort of standard sort of action outfit. She's got the shock glove on. The main detail, of course, here is mainly her hairstyle, in addition to a little bit of sort of makeup over the eyes and stuff like that to get across the fact that she wears makeup most of the time. And yeah, again, they have the details of her outfit pretty well done. But I think she, as you expect, which is probably the most plain of the wave, but they still captured her book one look pretty well, I think. But what are your thoughts on Asami?
Yeah, no, I think it definitely has. I mean, I think the detailing that they have on that outfit fits it, and from what we can see of the shot glove, it looks pretty much like it does in the show. So no, I think for the most part, the details that they got for her pretty much work for it.
Yeah, because I think the best you could expect more than that is maybe like a little bit of like transparent plastic to get across a little bit of like a shock actually happening on the glove, but that might have been a bit weird. It might have taken away from the detail of the glove itself. The last kind of common one, the main standard ones you're going to see in shops, is Amon, and yeah, they captured him really well. He was, I think, always going to work fairly well as a Funko Pop just because he has the mask on, and so that's going to be his the way the head works. This is probably the one where you get the least amount because it is sort of a concept. It doesn't really seem particularly like 3D, so you don't get a sense for like, okay, he's got the hood on, how like sunken in are the edges compared to the kind of hood kind of coming down, but the rest of his outfit, the armor kind of bits on his kind of knees, shoulders, and kind of wrists is, I think, really nicely done. They have the details of his mask good, and then he has, of course, the hand reaching out. So yeah, pretty good. But this is probably the one I want to see the most in like person, just to see the kind of, I suppose, geometry of like the face, how it works. But your thoughts on Amon?
Yeah, no, I definitely can understand that. I think because it has the mask and it has sort of like the black where the areas of the face normally would be, it's kind of hard to get an idea of how they're trying to sort of like, hide the fact that it is a mask rather than showing like any of the skin underneath or anything like that. So that part is interesting. I think it's cool that they have all the designs on the face, so that makes it look, more interesting than like their typical normal face on their figures, because it does have those designs on it. But I think the rest of it definitely has, all of the detail just, fit for this sort of style of character done pretty well.
And then the last one is the exclusive. It is going to be a Hot Topic exclusive in America, and I think if I looked up the European image, it just said special edition, which I believe just means it will be an exclusive at some point later on somewhere. I'm not entirely sure the full details. This is going to work basically exactly the same as the Aang on air scooter from the Avatar ones, in that if you go to Hot Topic, of course, you will have a chance to get the glow in the dark one or just the standard version. If you order online, most of the time they kind of just say that like when you order this, you have like, I think it's a 1 in 6 chance of getting the glow in the dark one, and that just gives you a sense for like what exactly the chase is. So this is one I definitely want to see exactly what the difference is between the standard and the kind of glow-in-the-dark one is, because the air scooter one works with and without the glow, because it was just like, oh, it's just Aang on the air scooter, and it's Avatar State Aang on the air scooter. Here, it's Avatar State either way, so I assume it's just literally glow-in-the-dark paint on the eyes, and the Rava symbol is going to be the main thing, but we don't really know. Interestingly, it does have a full-on stand, it seems like, a full-on plastic stand, in that she's constantly posed, sort of levitating off the ground. So that'll be interesting to see exactly how that works. I assume it's going to be clear plastic. But otherwise, like, it's book 2 Korra, as you can see from the different sort of wraps and stuff like that on her arms. So I'm happy about this. It's just one of those things, like anything I see with that Rava symbol, it's kind of like, yeah, I kind of need to get that. So I definitely like this, and I think it makes sense, as with the Avatar ones, that this is the exclusive. But what are your thoughts on the exclusive?
Yeah, no, I think for, being in this sort of mode for her, I think that definitely makes sense for it being sort of the exclusive, and of course having the glow effects, that makes sense in general. So no, I think it works pretty well. I think it'll be interesting to see how it looks in its full form, just to see like how far it is off the stand, how far, I don't know, just this sort of positioning I think could be interesting. But yeah, it definitely looks pretty cool overall.
Hmm. Yeah, it's just going to be one of those things where, like, if you need to get the chase one as well, that's going to be the tricky one from the Wave. I personally didn't find it that difficult to get a standard Aang on air scooter, in that most of the time you're just paying a little bit over kind of standard retail price because, you know, it's an exclusive, but like they get a lot of it in. Whereas, of course, you know, when there's only one of six in like a case for the standard, the chase one, it's much more expensive. And now that like we have the experience with the Aang one, I suppose people will know that it's going to go out of stock very quickly, so be more aware of it. But also that means, you know, people who are going to just buy them to sell them at a higher price are going to be more aware of it. So it just creates a whole situation. This is the whole collectible side of Funko Pops. But I don't think it's going to be that much of a problem unless you really need every single different one. So the final thing to say, I suppose, on these Funko Pops is just that more so than I suppose the reaction to all of this has been, where's Bolin? That I really like that as someone who really likes Bolin as a character. Just like pretty much everyone is asking that same question because he really feels like just he's missing from this rather than like they left him off to do in a later wave. And that I really don't know how you do Mako but not Bolin in a standard opening wave, because like we got like what's 7, 8, 9 figures in the first wave of Avatar. It's only five here for Korra, so it definitely felt like they went much smaller with this and left out one really obvious character. I think you can make a case for like Tenzin, Lin, that sort of thing, but Bolin definitely feels like he's just missing, nowhere to be seen for some reason. In that you include Bolin and it feels like a fairly complete set of most of the main cast. As it is, it just feels like we're missing a very important member of the group. But what are your thoughts on the lack of Bolin?
Yeah, no, that seems really odd to me, for sure. Like, I would rather have him than Amon, so I don't know, it's interesting to me. I mean, maybe they just thought that they needed to have, like, a villain just to sort of round out the wave. But, I mean, they probably could have, at least from what we've seen before, designed, you know, one more for the wave, and then they would have had the full set there. So, I don't know. It definitely seems odd to me considering, you know, Bolin's in there before Asami or anything like that. So, I don't know. It is quite particular. I mean, I'm sure if they continue with this, you know, group, you know, with Avatar, with Korra, that they'll have him eventually. But it definitely, you know, I can see why it would seem odd to most people, including myself, why he's not there.
Yeah. I suppose the only concern about this is that like we haven't actually got like a second wave of the Avatar Funkos announced yet. We got that sort of second wave of like exclusives with the Cabbage Merchant and the big Appa and also the really small Appa. But there was nothing particularly like new in terms of like a whole new wave announced. So who knows how long we're going to be waiting unless they suddenly announce that we're going to be getting you know, like a con exclusive later this year for Bolin. That would feel a bit much. Like Azula was already felt like a little bit too much of a main character, but you can understand why they did her as an exclusive. Bolin is just taking it a bit too far, I think. But you know, it's still early, of course. Like we don't even have any actual physical images. I doubt they'll extend the wave by the time it's properly revealed, but you know, definitely he's a character who's noted for not really being here. So that's interesting to look out for. But in general, I saw a lot of excitement when these were announced, and just that they're finally here, I suppose. And because we're sort of used to the two series being like treated super separately when they really should just be kind of put under the same umbrella as like just the Avatar franchise, but it's nice that they didn't wait too long to do the Korra ones. But we'll move from that into the next piece of information, and that is getting into some of our kind of Kyoshi novel information. So I'll actually start with the thing that happened a little later on, and that is that we got the announcement finally of the Rise of Kyoshi audiobook. So this sort of came out of nowhere, just the listing sort of, popped up all of a sudden. So we are getting audiobook of the first book, Rise of Kyoshi. It's going to be coming out May 5th, 2020 from Blackstone Publishing. And it's saying that it's going to be about 11 hours and it's going to be unabridged. So it's an audiobook, you sort of know what to expect, but like we don't know who's reading it yet. We don't know the exact approach of like, is it just going to be pretty standard, just reading the book? Will they have any Avatar sound effects or music involved? Like Star Wars audiobooks have like music, it's a full production. We don't know anything like that. But this is definitely an exciting reveal for me because I know a lot of people have sort of been waiting. They were kind of surprised that there wasn't an audiobook. For me, I'm definitely going to be getting this just because it's going to make the book a lot easier to sort of just go through over and over again. I can play games while listening to this and, get more familiar with the series because just having the book, it takes a lot of time and effort to just sit down and spend hours reading a fairly long book. So this is helpful for me, and it's going to be helpful for just people getting to experience this book again if they don't like to read that much. So what are your thoughts on this? Finally, we talked about this when the Rise of Kyoshi was announced, and we've had to wait a long time, but it's finally here.
Yeah, no, I think this is definitely really, really cool. It'll open it up to a bunch of more people that want to, check out the book but don't necessarily want to read it. So no, I think this is, it seems like at least more recently that it's been a really big thing for books to have an audiobook to sort of go with it. I mean, that's sort of like, almost seems like it goes hand in hand, at least for, most books that have like a decent sort of like, popularity behind them, or even ones that don't. Like there's definitely a lot of books from other authors that just seem to sort of like get it. Sometimes it's by, the authors themselves, the voice themselves. That happens a lot of times too. So no, I think this is definitely pretty cool. 11 hours seems, I guess, about right for the length of the actual book it is. So yeah, no, I guess it's just really waiting to see how they're sort of going to go about producing it. If it's just going to be sort of your standard sort of book production, or if it'll be a little bit more. I'm not really sure how to go about it quite yet, but it should be pretty good regardless.
Yeah, and then a few people have already been asking, like, are they going to get Kyoshi's voice actress in to do this, or what? That's an option, but who really knows? Either way, it's just it's a good announcement, and the best thing about it is that like it's got to be available on Audible when it comes out, so you can get the free trial and get it for free basically if you cancel before the month is over. So that's another kind of good thing about it if you don't want to spend any money on it, I suppose. The continuing on the Kyoshi news, though, we finally got sort of what we were waiting for, and that is the Shadow of Kyoshi cover has been revealed. So we knew going in that this was going to have sort of a bit of a red kind of theme to it, and that we were going to see Rangi on the cover, but we finally got it revealed, and yeah, instead of red and black like they sort of teased, it's more red and white with only a little bit of black. So it sort of fits more in line with the previous one while also having a different color palette. We still have Kyoshi on the cover, sort of front and center, but right beside her is Rangi, so we get our first look at her. And yeah, like it sort of highlighted that like she's kind of what you expect. She's Fire Nation. She's kind of wearing a soldier's uniform, top knot. Because we're dealing with sort of the past compared to where we're usually focused, it's that kind of more pointy old style Fire Nation armor that they sort of mentioned in the book 1 finale. I think the Water Tribe only had like old Fire Nation armor from previous battles and stuff like that. So we see that here used on Rangi, and I think the only thing to note about this is that it turns out that this official rendition of Rangi is like all but like identical to one of the main fan artists who was actually drawing Rangi beforehand. Like it's super similar, and it's kind of weird that we still don't know who the artist is for the first or this cover, and so it's just this complete mystery. And it was weird to see no one really talk about that either. Just like no one seems to care who did this art. So I'm guessing the artist probably did take some reference from that fan art because it is very similar. But what are your thoughts on the cover?
Yeah, no, I think it's pretty cool. I think it definitely fits the style of what we've come to think of. And yeah, I did hear about the whole sort of style thing. I don't know if it's confirmed or not, but someone mentioned that yeah, because it looks so similar, it definitely looks like they did, or maybe they actually did take reference from the main fan art of the character that we've seen so far online. I don't know if that's true or not either way. But I don't know. I don't know. I guess for book covers, depending on how it's sort of made and stuff, it's not usually something that really is a key thing as far as knowing the artist. I know probably because we're into like the animation and the stuff of the actual show and stuff. We always sort of keep in mind of like like the production of the actual show, or the fact that Mike and Brian actually do art themselves, so sometimes they'll have a hand in it. Or especially with the comics, obviously comics is all about sort of the art and the story itself, so that's something that we sort of like key in on general. But I guess for books, usually, especially like bigger books, you usually don't hear that much about the cover artist unless they really want to make it known. It could just be someone from like the publishing company that's making it, or going out for it, or it could just be that's how they arrange to have to deal with it. It would be cool to know, just because the art does seem really cool. So it seems like something that like could work in a lot of other like ways. Like they could make like posters or other sort of art of it, but maybe that's just not the way they're going about it. But it definitely looks really cool. It'll be cool to see when it comes out and everything.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, the only other thing to note is just that, like, with the audiobook revealed and now this officially revealed, we have 3 kind of Kyoshi things happening like over the summer, like all in a row. Like in early May we have the audiobook. In kind of, I think it's mid-June, we have the Rise of Kyoshi paperback release, and then in July the Shadow Kyoshi comes out. So that's really cool to see them kind of committing to a lot of different projects for Kyoshi. Even just the audiobook getting confirmed after all this time, I'm assuming that is like confirmation it was successful. We want to do an audiobook version of this. That's the only real way I can interpret it. But yeah, so yeah, I suppose we're just waiting now for pretty much I suppose excerpts to come out for Shadow of Kyoshi to get a first look at the kind of text inside, and then I suppose also the excerpt from the audiobook as well. And then I'm going to guess that the first book getting an audiobook realistically confirms the Shadow of Kyoshi will get one too, unless it just doesn't do very well, which I doubt. So yeah, exciting stuff for Kyoshi. Nice to see the Avatar novels doing well, but we also want to see more of them confirmed. Some quick pieces of news is just that the Diamond Select toys and the action figures for Avatar, we now have confirmation that we're going to see what Wave 2 and 3 are at Toy Fair at the end of February. I think that's New York Toy Fair. So we should know what the characters are in those waves at that point. So that's going to be exciting. If they stick to 3 figures a wave, like Wave 1, it means we'll get to see 6 different figures revealed at Toy Fair. So there's a decent amount of speculation going on. Of course, we're probably going to get like the rest of our sort of main characters. So Sokka, Toph seem like all but confirmed. The other slots I think are kind of open. Like I think everyone wants it to be Suki, but given how like officially Suki tends to be treated not by the fandom, she's definitely sort of up in the air. All the fans would like to see her included and get a figure, and that'd be a really cool figure. The Kyoshi warrior outfit would look really good. The accessories are already sort of pre-made. You know exactly what to do, but will they do it or not? Iroh's probably going to get a figure. Ozai, Azula, they might do a Fire Nation soldier. There's a lot of options, but what do you think are the obvious go-tos for the next 2 waves?
I mean, there's so many characters that they could go with. I mean, as far as like the ones that we have already and sort of seeing, I mean, I don't know. It's interesting how we always bring up Suki and sort of where she could be and sort of the lineup of things. I think that would definitely be one that a lot of people want, as far as, as well as like a lot of the sort of like main sort of like villains. I think those would be really cool to sort of get, different sort of renditions of them. I don't know, there's a lot that they could go with that I think they really should sort of like ramp up with. I guess, I don't know, I always wonder like what's the max, amount they could have in any sort of wave, and sort of base it on that.
Yeah, like I suppose yeah, it's not confirmed. It's for sure always three away. But I don't think that's necessarily the case for all their other lines that they do. So yeah,
Hmm.
we could see even more characters than that. That's always an option. So I'm guessing like at least the initial reaction seems like, oh, it's going to be popular. We'll do more. And then there's always the chance that they do the alternate versions of other characters in terms of like book one Aang, book one Zuko, book three Katara.
Hmm.
That was a little bit of a controversy with the first wave of like, why is Katara the only book one? But I suppose for sort of almost like history reasons, you probably had to do her original design as a figure just because it never happened before. Um, the other small piece of news before we get into the main topic is just that I think someone asks Faith Erin Hicks on Twitter, will the Imbalance Library Edition have commentary, the annotation commentary that the previous Avatar books have had? And she confirmed that it will have that. Nothing more than that. She just basically said yes to that question. So that confirms something we were a little bit unsure about, just because Turf Wars Library Edition didn't have commentary. So I'm guessing that just means that they're going to keep the Avatar books consistent and have the annotation commentary, and then the Korra books are going to be sort of a slightly smaller size and not have it. So that's nice. We'll see how they do things kind of going forward. Um, I suppose the only other thing to mention before we get into our sort of Runes of the Empire Part 3 stuff is that we're still waiting on what I assume is going to be some sort of big Dark Horse announcement, because they said back in like mid-November that we would see the cover for the Promise Omnibus soon, and we still haven't seen that yet. We know it's getting a new cover, and it's been like 2 and a bit months at this point, so they're definitely stretching the definition of soon. Obviously, it's been a long time at this point since like Imbalance Part 3 came out, so we're waiting for the next Avatar book to be announced. We know it's in production with the same team. If you follow like Peter Wortman on Twitter, you can see he's posting like updates from his like Excel spreadsheet of like progress on the art, and it's getting close to being finished. So we're just waiting for an announcement on that. Obviously, Runes of the Empire Part 3 is like the last new story content that we have from Dark Horse, and that's coming out in like just over 3 weeks. So they have to announce stuff for Avatar, for Korra. We're waiting for the omnibus cover. Runes of the Empire Library Edition will also need to be announced. And of course, the 15-year anniversary of Avatar is coming up in or around the same time as the release of Runes of the Empire Part 3. So unless they're waiting to make the big announcement on the anniversary or like just before it, I'm kind of not sure what exactly they're waiting for, because they're quickly running out of books that they have like on the go for Avatar and Korra. So I hope that stuff gets announced, revealed kind of sooner rather than later. What do you think their sort of approach is with, like, we know there is announcements to be made, but they're not making them just yet?
Yeah, it makes me wonder. I mean, when we see sort of like the production updates from some of the artists, it makes me wonder sort of if they're waiting for like not just to announce what's sort of coming, but sort of like the extra sort of stuff that they're sort of, I guess, planning on behind the scenes. Because it definitely seems like, I don't know, they always seem to sort of like wait to sort of like bulk release their news, which I guess is one way about going about it, but it almost seems like it might be better to let things out, assuming that they're actually going and everything sort of like earlier. I don't know, I'm not really sure.
Yeah, and then there's also I don't know if it's Avatar related or not, but like Rachel Roberts teased that new book that
Mm-hmm.
no one's heard about before. I don't know if it's Avatar related, but like anniversary, they're building up a lot of announcements. That'll be a really cool thing to add on to that. That
Yeah.
would be a huge announcement. New Avatar book, new Korra book, new covers, new kind of reprint style books, and something completely new. That would be a very, very big announcement depending on what it is, but again, we're still waiting to see. Uh, I'm guessing in about the week before the anniversary, that's probably when we'll find out. I'd be very surprised if we get to the release of Runes of the Empire Part 3 and don't have that announcement yet, because it just feels weird that we're up to speed. Like, we don't know any new Avatar content coming out apart from unannounced Avatar book that's getting close to, I suppose, being kind of put into print, basically. So that's the kind of main news. The main topic here that we have, though, is discussing Legend of Korra: Runes of the Empire Part 3. The book is coming out February 25th, so we're just over 3 weeks away. We will, of course, be doing a big review on this book when it comes out. But for now, we have the preview pages, and we'll also just in general do our final sort of speculation analysis before we actually do our review of the book. So, as usual, this had its kind of scattered kind of release of the preview. I think we got the first page from Random House, just their usual preview, where they show you about 5-6 pages, but because it includes the cover and the credits, you only get 1 page of content. iTunes, like the next day, put up their preview, and we saw the first 5 pages of the book. And then just yesterday, the day before, Google Books put up their preview, and we got to see even more than that. Now, of course, you usually expect the Google Books preview to reveal like 40-ish pages. It seems like it's a little bit more difficult to get other pages this time out, in that I haven't really seen people talking that like they've seen most of the book. The first 17 pages, I think, seem to be the go-to, and then I've seen, I think, 3 other pages from inside the book, and then some people have seen like the last 3 pages of the book. But in general, it seems like they've sort of tightened it up, whereas before there was maybe like 10 pages in like the entire book no one saw before release, but now it seems like there's a good amount of it gone. So yeah, usual sort of preview kind of stuff happening here, but we'll just go through the preview because it is just the first, you know, 6th of the book or whatever. We'll just go through it here. So opening page, of course, it's everyone going back to Zaofu in the aftermath of Part 2. They have, of course, brainwashed Asami with them, and it's also Kuvira's homecoming, basically, to Zaofu under more, normal conditions, as normal as the situation here is. So they get inside, and it's just this kind of reveal that, like, oh yeah, we have this interesting situation where we now have 3 different characters under house arrest in Asami, Baatar Jr., and Kuvira. So it's a very unusual situation here. And straight away, as of 3 pages into the book, Baatar Jr. is introduced into the story. So I suppose we'll just stop there after like the first 2 pages. But what are your thoughts, I suppose, just on the pacing here? We just get straight down to business. We're immediately back in Zaofu, and Baatar's right here, like they said he would be in Part 2.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's good that they're moving it along. I think there's no real reason to sort of like, drag things out, especially, with all the stuff that we've been talking about with what they have to sort of like cover and sort of like, people that have to like at least start some form of like reconciliation with each other. I think it's good that, they're not sort of waiting to sort of like, they're not going to cross paths until like the end of the book or like midway through the book. So the fact that they're giving it up here, and even by the end of just the preview that we see here, we can see some more subtle interactions. I think is really good that they're, not waiting around, because otherwise I would really wonder, how they're going to solve a lot of things by the end of the book. I mean, I still think, not everything will be resolved by the end of the book, especially after seeing these previews, but I think, it gives you more of an idea of what they're going to at least try to go for.
Yeah, like this preview definitely makes it clear that Kuvira is more going to be like a sort of long-term kind of project in a way for the comics, rather than this book is her arc, like basically all of it. We're going to have another story where Kuvira is kind of more heavily involved at some point, I think. But yeah, going into page 3 here, we have very, very interesting scene here with the reunion here of Baatar and Kuvira. She says, I didn't know if I'd ever see you again. And he says, and you wouldn't have if Korra and her friends hadn't saved me. Kuvira's response to this is very interesting. I feel terrible about what happened, but you remember all the pressure we were under. I'm sure if you had been in my position, you would have. Baatar cuts her off. Tried to kill my fiancé with a blast of spirit energy. Never. I loved you, Kuvira. So very intense page there. Exactly what you expect, I think, from Batara's side of things. But I did find it interesting, like Kuvira with the I feel terrible about trying to kill you, but and trying to defend that position. I've been fairly okay with most of her responses to things in this series up to now, in terms of like, I believed her when she said she wouldn't have gone as far as to do brainwashing and stuff like that. That isn't her style. That isn't something she would have agreed with or approved. I actually did believe her on that. Here is definitely an example of like, okay, she's trying, but this is still definitely sort of old Kuvira style of things, of just trying to justify for her, great uniter kind of aspirations, killing Baatar. And it still puts it up in the air of like, how does she feel about Baatar? He just straight away makes it clear, I loved you. You don't really get her response here. So what are your thoughts on the first page of their reunion?
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting to see his side of things and to see, how he felt about her versus her and her sort of like, I guess goals that she has. I mean, I don't know, it's always interesting because she has like, it seems at least that she has definite lines that she doesn't want to cross. But then there's other things that she's willing to sort of like forego for her own sort of like goals or what she sees as being sort of like the best possible way of doing things. So I don't know, it's interesting to try to get a read on where her morals actually lie.
Yeah, because it's this weird. I suppose her attempt at redemption is kind of like, she's not trying to, like, she's not really acknowledging that, like, oh, I did all this terrible stuff in the past and I'm changing. It's more of like, I did all this stuff in the past and I still believe it, but I'm going to try to be different going forward, given that this is the way things are. In that, like, going all the way back to like part 1 and the trial, and her response there of like why she said not guilty, of like, she still believes in a lot of what she did back when she was the Great Uniter. It's just that I suppose she also sees some of the mistakes as well. And it is interesting that in this case she doesn't necessarily see the Baatar thing as a mistake, or at least emotionally doesn't handle it very well here with the reunion. But he continues on and says, when Mother told me you were coming, she mentioned that you were trying to change. I didn't believe her. I had to see it for myself, but you're exactly the same. And so he walks back into his room and just slams the door in her face as she goes to talk to him. So Sue just basically says, Kuvira, go to your quarters. And Korra immediately goes to knock at his door, because they do actually need him to reverse the brainwashing, so he has to be kept brought up to speed on what's going on. We don't see the rest of this conversation, but Korra later on informs us about what exactly was said. But about what I expected from their kind of first interaction here. But what are your thoughts on these next 2 pages here?
Yeah, no, it does seem what you would expect to sort of happen. She's still not sort of, I don't know, accepting of her sort of size of the wrongdoing here. So seeing Baatar sort of like basically just sort of cut her off and go doing his own sort of thing or trying to figure it out sort of seems how things would work out here. And yeah, just, of course he has to be sort of brought up to speed with whatever is happening and just sort of actually helping, what they're actually going through.
Mm-hmm. We cut to a different scene here, Gowling City Hall, and Prince Wu walks in. Again, it's important to remember here, he was the cliffhanger ending to part 2. He was captured, brainwashed, so here's that being executed here. I'd like a word, Mayor Rhee, about the election. In less than a week, the citizens of Gowling will be casting their votes, and he just says there's been a change of plans. The election will take place today, as we see the brainwashed, sort of blank expression on Wu's face here as he says this. The mayor's like, today, but the voters won't even know to show up. But Wu just says they're already here, they're all outside. And it's the whole sort of, Go Guan squad here who've been brainwashed. And he just says, for the good of the kingdom, I've decided that the move to democracy cannot wait any longer. Here is my royal decree concerning the matter. The mayor again tries to say, give me a few days to organize this, but Wu shouts at him and just says, how dare you defy your king? And Rhee is forced to go through with this. And he says, I'll go let the voters in. So while everyone else is planning how to stop the vote from happening, they're missing that the vote is happening like literally right now. That I get the impression that like we get a bit of a time skip over the course of a day as we go through the rest of the pages. I get the impression the voting has already taken place by the time they're ready to do anything. So it's going to be interesting to see how the plot actually plays out. But what are your thoughts on this scene with the mayor and Wu?
Yeah, no, I guess this is pretty much what you would expect to happen after he was going to get brainwashed in the last one. So yeah, no, it's interesting to see, I guess, Wu act in this moment as like sort of like a real type of king, which of course for him is completely sort of out of character, but that's the whole point of him being brainwashed in this sort of way here. So no, I think it's definitely interesting how this is going on at the same time that they're still trying to plan on how to figure out how to like sort of remedy the whole brainwashing situation. So I don't know. It makes it more interesting the fact that essentially what it seems like is that he'll already be sort of president by the time they actually sort of get to do things. But it seems like they have sort of a plan that might work. I don't know. We'll find out.
We cut back to Zhao Fu and we see Naga and Pabu playing outside as everyone else is having a meal. So kind of everyone's here pretty much. There's Toph, Su, Baatar Senior, Baatar Jr. isn't there though. We have Wei Wing, Huan, Opal, Korra, and Kuvira. Kuvira in a different outfit as well is interesting, more super casual kind of clothes. Kuvira says, so Baatar is willing to work with me. That's wonderful news. And Korra catches everyone up to speed on what they talked about. He agreed to temporarily put aside his anger towards you in order to help the greater good. He still feels guilty for everything he did when he was part of the Earth Empire. Opal speaks up at this point and says, unlike some people, clearly referring to Kuvira, and Kuvira's not particularly happy about this and glances over at Opal. But Korra continues and just says, but Baatar made it clear that once you two recreate Dr. Sheng's brainwashing device, he never wants to see you again. And she says, I'll respect his wishes. Wei and Wing, I forget which one is which. They both kind of say half of the plot here. If the goal is to put an end to the Earth Empire once and for all, why don't we call in some reinforcements? And the other says, yeah, Guan's not such a hotshot. If we had the full force of the Metal Clan behind us, we could take down his entire army lickety-split. Su doesn't agree with this and just says, we can't be seen as the aggressors. We can't interfere with the democratic movement. Toph, of course, speaks up and says, what democratic movement? Guan brainwashed half the voters and probably the Earth King too. And Kuvira actually complements this plan in that he'll be able to have influence over the entire Earth Kingdom. Opal speaks up again. I bet you wish you had thought to brainwash everyone, then you'd still be in power. Kuvira argues that that's not what I meant. And interestingly, Su actually very much coming across as the mother of both of them just says, that's enough, girls. We need to let the vote go ahead and see it play out. I suppose we'll stop it here just to address some of these interactions here, but what are your thoughts on some of these dynamics over the course of this meal that they're having?
Yeah, no, I don't know, I mean, it's a wonder that they're sort of like sitting together in this sort of like civil fashion to sort of begin with, considering everything that sort of happened. So to see, all these, I guess, sort of like, microaggressions sort of playing out at the table here is definitely pretty interesting. I mean, I guess, they can keep it together somewhat enough here. But, you can see how much, sort of how Opal really doesn't care anything for Kuvira after everything that has sort of happened here, and just sort of, getting everyone to see, I guess, sort of their point of how they think they should sort of deal with the situation. It's definitely an interesting way of seeing things, but I guess this is sort of just the whole idea of the Metal Clan and just Su's way of doing things, of having this sort of like meal, sit down, sort of like have things come together. So it's a nice change of the way of, like, I guess, sort of seeing things play out.
Yeah, because like Su's entire like philosophy is that she kind of agrees everyone should be given a second chance. That's what happened to her. She get her chef is like a former criminal or something like that, if I remember correctly, and stuff like that. That is her to a T. She got Varric on board after his whole book 2. He was kind of the villain type thing, so it makes sense why she's sort of frustrated with Kuvira, but still letting her just sit there and eat and kind of slowly softening to kind of Kuvira and beginning to act a little bit more motherly here. That's why the That's Enough Girls is actually kind of pretty notable, because I think probably the main thing I get from this is just that I really wonder how close, before everything happened, Kuvira and Opal were, because technically they're sisters, and in that, like, Opal is like Sue's only daughter apart from Kuvira, adopted daughter. So did those two get on really well? I kind of almost get the impression they probably did get on really well, and that's why Opal is actually like the most upset at Kuvira, and we saw that from all the way back at the start of book 4, that Opal, who's usually like super nice and super sweet, has such an attitude towards Kuvira, and it almost kind of like goes against her character in a way, but she's super annoyed at Kuvira about what happened, more so than anyone else, which I think they're probably going to have to explore in this book, and I'm actually kind of quite excited to see. Do you have any thoughts on what you think the dynamic between Opal and Kuvira is?
Yeah, no, I think your idea of them sort of probably being close as sort of being the only two girls there, I think pretty much makes sense to me, which would make sense why Opal does seem like she has such hate for Kuvira and everything that she's done, which, makes me wonder if there would be, any way for them to ever reconcile after everything that sort of happened here. But it definitely doesn't seem like that's going to happen anytime soon.
Mm-hmm. Next up, Toph says, don't get your hopes up, Sue. I pretty much forfeited that election the second we hightailed it out of Gao-Ling. Guan's got it in the bag. Batari walks in and says, not necessarily. Assuming I can figure out how to restore Asami's mind, we can then use that knowledge to free Gao-Ling's brainwashed citizens. Once they realize what Commander Guan did to them, Kuvira finishes his sentence for him, they'll turn on Guan and he'll lose all his support. And Sue finishes this and says, and you'll be voted in as Governor Beifong. Toph's response is, yippee, because she's not particularly excited about this at all. Kuvira speaks to Batar and says, I appreciate you agreeing to help. He just kind of walks out the door. We should get started. So he's agreed to work with her, but he's still upset. But he said he's going to put like his aggressive sort of feelings about this aside. So he's being okay here, while it still obviously isn't okay. So very interesting stuff. I still would like a little bit more exploration about why exactly Toph is even on board with this in the first place. I still maintain it was one of the more confusing parts of part 2 about the kind of, loops they sort of jumped through to get Wu's vision to like link in with Toph somehow, and that is what gets her on board. I don't exactly see what the idea is, apart from just Toph trusts the swamp, and so when a vision is shown, she sort of agrees with that, but it was Wu's vision, and they tried to use that to get Toph on board. I still don't get exactly why. Like, logically, she's a celebrity, she's well respected, it makes sense why they want her to be involved, but she herself is a little bit like, I don't really know exactly why, so we'll see what happens. I'd almost be shocked if we finish this book and Toph is actually the governor of anywhere, but we'll see what happens. What are your thoughts on this scene here?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, it seems like it's a possible solution that just sort of like after assuming everything sort of works out, that she'll just sort of be the default just by, being the only other one there. But yeah, no, I mean, I don't know. I think it's interesting. I mean, I don't know. I guess I wouldn't be too surprised if Toph just sort of like drops into the position and, it just sort of happens to work out. But, with her and just the way that she acts in general, I wouldn't be surprised if, she winds up getting, or, someone else actually winds up coming in and actually doing most of the actual sort of like governing and whatnot.
Mm-hmm. Then we cut to a scene with Korra and Asami. Of course, Asami is sort of being watched because she's technically an enemy at this point because she's brainwashed. Korra says, Batar Jr. and Kuvira have been working all day. This nightmare will soon be over. She tries to touch Asami's hand, but Asami slaps it away. Korra is kind of taken aback by this, still doesn't know how to really deal or interact with this brainwashed Asami, and Korra is told that Batar is ready for Asami. They're finally going to do some of the tests. As much as I get the idea of what they're going for with Korra and Asami, of like Asami's brainwashed, Korra's reaction to it, I still feel you're kind of you're you're kind of missing out on just having Asami involved in the story by having her brainwashed, and I don't think, Korra's feelings about what exactly is happening here isn't like the strongest kind of tension that you could have. Like, I think I said it for part two, but I almost feel like this should have been like reversed. I think it almost should have been like everyone having to deal with maybe like Korra getting brainwashed, because Korra's already super developed. I don't think she's gonna get that much out of just dealing with a brainwashed Asami for a while, while Asami's the one who I think actually needs the development, and here she is like not actively present in the story here because she's brainwashed. I think that's just a problem with brainwashing plots in general, in that those characters are gone. Like the characters who replace them are nobodies, basically, pretty much. You just create a little bit of tension, but it doesn't leave much depth, in my opinion. But what are your thoughts on this quick scene with Korra and Asami?
Yeah, no, I think that's an interesting point to make for sure. Because they're, I don't know. I mean, I guess it's interesting that Asami's not really sort of being aggressive or anything in this way. She's just sort of, there, which is sort of the problem to begin with, is that there is no real sort of development. I guess, any sort of development will happen sort of like after, hopefully the brainwashing is reversed, and depending on, how she remembers things, or if she remembers things, there'll be something that comes from that at this point. I mean, I don't know. They're not really, she's not really doing enough that it seems like it's really sort of like, breaking Korra down or anything like that. So we don't see anything from, her side from that, other than, just a bit of her just sort of being sad with the whole situation. But, I guess considering that she has, some hope that this can be reversed, it's not like she's completely, lost or anything like that. So I don't know. I don't know if the reverse would have been any better, because I think that would have, of course, caused a whole bunch of other issues just with the whole sort of like power scaling of things. So I don't know. I think it definitely doesn't help as far as, having these two characters develop, with each other. But, I don't know. I guess we'll have to see how it plays out.
Yeah, it's just, I don't think it's the most effective thing, just because, like, they're not even going, like, particularly hard on the, like, how Korra feels about what's happening here, because it's all very just, like, silent. Like, Korra knows it's not Asami, but just that, like, they need to get this reversed, and then even, like, when they do resolve it, it's kind of like, I don't really see too much of a development to come out of that, because it's just Korra is glad that Asami's back. Because, like, anything Asami has done, in that, like, she hasn't actually really done anything as a kind of brainwashed, enemy here. She has nothing really to apologize for, apart from, like, I got captured or whatever, and I don't think you can blame anyone for that. The more interesting dynamic there is probably the fact that, like, Bolin hurt Opal, and even though Opal doesn't actually seem to be, like, actually injured in any way, it'll probably be said that, like, she has a bruise on her shoulder or something like that. That'll be the more interesting thing. Here, it'll just be a Korra-Asami moment when it happens. In that, like, okay, yeah, there might be some intrigue about, like, does Asami remember anything about her time being brainwashed, or what? I'm not really sure, but they're going to have to explore that to some degree. But we continue here, so we go into the sort of lab, the makeshift lab that Kuvira and Baatar have been working in, and it says here, you've outdone yourself, Baatar. This looks almost exactly like the device in Dr. Sheng's brainwashing lab. And he just says, having worked closely with Dr. Sheng, I'm familiar with her thought process, and your description of her setup was extremely helpful too. You always had an excellent memory. Now for the hard part, figuring out the settings Dr. Sheng used to alter Asami's brainwaves. So I do find that interesting, in that, like, okay, they've been working together for a day, and he said he'd put his feelings aside, but, like, there's a compliment there, so it gives you some hope that, like, they weren't just arguing for, like, an entire day, that they're actually talking to each other normally for a while. So that's at least something. But what are your thoughts on the start of this scene here?
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't know. I guess this would be like your standard sort of, thing of thinking that maybe they'll have some sort of reconciliation with each other, just based on them sort of like, working with each other without trying to like, rip off each other's heads or anything like that. So I don't know. Maybe this is the start of something. Maybe not. I don't know. It still seems like he's still pretty hurt about everything that's happened.
So he says, I'll begin with low intensity electromagnetic pulses. And Kuvira reads out the sort of reverse brainwashing orders. You will no longer obey Commander Guan's orders. The Avatar is no longer your enemy. Your mind is yours again. She opens her eyes, but she just says, I'm only loyal to Commander Guan. And they get across, it's now sort of, the sun is beginning to set at this point. They try another setting. The same again, you'll no longer obey his orders. Avatar is no longer your enemy. Your mind is yours again. Still, she just continues to say, that Commander Guan, I'm only loyal to him. And the idea is that I think they're getting across the idea they're gradually increasing the kind of intensity of the waves and doing the same thing over and over again and not getting anywhere. And all of a sudden it's nighttime now. So the voting has already taken place, we assume, and they've still made no progress apart from they have roughly what the brainwashing device is. They just can't get the settings right. So, an interesting one, are they maybe wasting a couple of pages here saying the same thing like 2 or 3 times? At least it gets across the passage of time, and I think it's kind of important to the plot, the timing of things when they take place in regards to what's actually happening in Gowling. But interesting enough. Doesn't really give us too much of an insight into like, are they just gonna try another setting and it works, or is there another trick to this to actually resolve the brainwashing? But what are your thoughts on this final scene from the preview?
Yeah, so I mean, clearly it's not going to be such a easy thing to sort of reverse here, especially with seemingly the time that it's taken them just to test it so far. So I wouldn't be surprised if it takes a bit sort of longer, even if they do have, necessarily the right equipment, or maybe they have to like, I don't know, get some actual sort of like information on how, the real machine actually works for them to actually sort of have any sort of success with this. I mean, it definitely doesn't seem like it would be a quick process that they're going to be able to do, like, with like a lot of people or something like that. So it makes me wonder how they're going to sort of do it in mass or scale it up or whatever. Or maybe that'll be like, that's when like some other character that's, technically oriented, like, Varric or something like that would come in and sort of help with that or something like that. I don't know. It's interesting to see how this is playing out. It's definitely not a cut and dry thing.
So yeah, that's about the first, I think, 16 or so pages of the book. So there's still, just under 60 or so pages left in the actual book when it comes out. So still lots of time to cover stuff, but there's also a lot of things to be resolved in that we still have like Kuvira's basically interactions with like everyone. Her dynamic with like almost every character involved in the story is kind of something I think we want to know about going forward. We have to return to the kind of flashback story they've been covering, that they've only really been giving us like a page or so each volume so far. What are we to take away from that? I'm going to guess the next part of that flashback is likely going to be Kuvira's maybe like initial interactions with her new kind of siblings, I suppose. Her meeting Batar, Opal, Wei Wing for the first time, that sort of thing. We'll see how that plays out, but other than that, like you still have the whole, okay, everyone else needs to be not brainwashed anymore. But then you also have the bigger plot of just, it's still up in the air if the elections, even when Wu is unbrainwashed, if the elections are going to take place or not, or is Wu actually going to kind of agree with what the vision of Hu Ting said and, kind of think like, oh, am I just running away from the potential of me being the king? By saying democracy is what we need, when I could actually be a good leader. That do we need to change things so quickly, so suddenly, when people have been okay in the last while with me as leader? And that's going to be interesting, and it seems like it's a lot of sort of more in-depth plots. Will they have the time to cover it all while there's still going to be action happening? There still has to be another confrontation with Guan that happens, and just summing everything up, wrapping everything up. I hope they can really bring it all together. But what are your thoughts, based on the preview you've seen now about, the potential of this book to like really bring this story to an end?
I think I can definitely see, the main sort of plot line sort of being brought to close. I think there's, like you mentioned, there's definitely a lot more that can continue on after this book, which, I hopefully they do choose to do with, just sort of the whole sort of like Metal Clan and just dealing with everything, with that family in general. I think, there's a lot there that can be explored, as well as just, obviously the world in general. There's always more stuff there that can be discussed. But I don't know, I could see, dealing with the presidency, dealing with sort of this main plot, dealing with sort of Wu, and sort of that sort of idea. I mean, if it were to just sort of get, turned back over to him sort of being the leader, but being more of it in sort of the presidential way rather than the king, I could see, something like that potentially sort of working out. I don't know. I think there's definitely a couple ways that could go about it. I can see a lot of it. I can envision how a lot of it can be sort of solved within the period of time that they have. I mean, we can see from the beginning that they are trying to move things along pretty fast. And obviously, there's going to be some big conflicts that I can see for sure sort of happening, just especially with like, potentially the election already being done and over with. That's like a whole thing in itself. So they're definitely, I think, going towards the right way. I think there's definitely going to be more for sure after this, hopefully.
And then I think probably like the biggest thing that the book is going to have to do, and I think it's going to happen, it's just about how they exactly execute it, is that Kuvira is going to have some sort of a really big moment that really, I suppose, proves to everyone else that she is, being truthful about trying to change. Some action or statement that really highlights to everyone who sees it that she isn't just lying to do something or something like that. That, her putting herself on the line to try and save, Mako, Bolin, Asami, everyone basically. That's going to be a big notable action that you can't like take away from Kuvira or frame in some different way. It's all about how they get to that point, and that like we discussed in like the third page of this preview, that like she's still saying things like, I'm kind of sorry about what happened, but I'm, just completely going straight past, I tried to kill you with Baatar. So there's still issues there, things she doesn't quite get. So through her sort of reflecting on her past, what is the sort of breakthrough on like Kuvira's side of things going to be? Because we sort of get the dynamic with the characters towards her of like, they can see she's trying, but they don't trust her because of past actions. And so you understand from Kuvira's point of view how she feels frustrated that no one believes her, but she has to understand why that is the case and, really try and fix that. So it is ultimately about what does she say to Sue, where do the flashbacks go character development wise about things, and that's where like part two probably should have had a bit more depth to it. But they're trying to get across the idea of like, was Kuvira actually just this kind of lying character who always ran away from her responsibility, like they were trying to get at in the first part and the second part? Do you blame it all on her parents, or is there actually a lot for her herself to explain? That's what they're going to have to get into. And ultimately, it probably has to be something along those lines of just Kuvira admitting that, like, my parents, like, I wasn't the best kid or something like that, but that's going to be weird. How do you write that? But just her reflecting that she wasn't this perfect character. She wasn't just a victim sort of growing up, that she sort of made some of that happen through her own actions. I think that's probably going to have to be the big truth about herself that's revealed. But where do you see them going with the actual character takeaway from Kuvira in this part?
Yeah, no, I think that would be really big if they did, if she was able to sort of reflect on herself and maybe her early childhood and seeing that maybe she was the cause of some issues. I mean, I don't know, it's still kind of hard to get the whole sort of picture of what type of kid, what type of child she was. Like, we can see, her sort of like breaking down the wall and having to be brought to Sue somewhere to sort of like, that can, sort of watch over her and take care of her. But was sort of, I don't know, I think there's still more to that story, which maybe that would have been better if we knew that earlier, because it seems like, from what we've seen here, it seems like the plot's definitely going to revolve around sort of like what's happening here in Gowling and just sort of dealing with that whole situation. So I wonder how they're going to sort of flip that back to her past and see how that's going to make her sort of reflect on things. I think, like you said, if that is something that she sees in herself, that, maybe she was the cause of a lot of issues, that would be sort of like the trigger moment for her to sort of realize that maybe everything that she's done in the past, recently hasn't really been the best. I don't know. That would definitely, show a big change for her as a person. But yeah, I think probably more along the lines of what you're saying of her just sort of doing some act would probably be a major thing of revealing to, everyone her real sort of current feelings, at least.
And like, I do think like we're going to come back around to the trial again. I'm assuming we're going to get to towards the end of part 3 that is the trial actually taking place. They're going to have to bring in some of, the fact that like most of the group saw Kuvira along the course of the way, and she, in the grand scheme of things, didn't really act out of line at any point in terms of doing anything like truly that you could punish her more for. She helped the entire time, and there's going to be a big moment that happens. It's going to be all about, she's going to get another chance to speak at the trial. What does she say this time? Is it just her reversing her plea and actually saying guilty, or is it more than that? I assume it will be her kind of maybe coming across initially as like she's going to say the same thing from part 1, but then kind of reversing it, and instead of like, no, I'm not going to let you sort of, taint my entire legacy or whatever she was kind of getting at in the first part. And she's more going to be like, no, I now understand everything I did, like the problems with everything I did. I still think you probably have to keep it that like she doesn't just feel bad about everything that she did, and that I still think she will ultimately agree with the idea of like she needed to step in to stabilize the Earth Kingdom when she did. That's maybe a point she'll still make, but like a lot of the other stuff she will be much more remorseful about, and that's where they might be able to bring in her true feelings about the whole Baatar situation as a way to sort of get her to that point. But it's all about like the depth and the amount of time they give to the character stuff. My only real fear with part 3 is that they'll have the sort of technical plot of the book take up too much time and not give enough time to the characters. That's what I kind of felt happened in like Imbalance. That it just, the whole just this happens then this happens got in the way of just dealing with the issue at hand here. So I hope they actually give time for Kuvira to actually have character reflection and so on. But do you have any other speculations about Runes of the Empire Part 3?
No, not particularly. I think they definitely, I don't know, I think it's really going to be an interesting balancing act of how they're going to give, time to the plot versus time to the characters.
Mm-hmm. And then I suppose that the main prediction as like a, which side are you on? Do you think we're going to end Runes of the Empire with Wu committing to being king, or do you think the elections are just going to go ahead?
I would hope that the elections would go ahead. I think I could see him having, a similar sort of like presidential role in another sort of area. I think I could see him sort of seeing, if everything works out here, seeing the process and how it goes about, that he would put his hand in another place. Maybe, he doesn't really need to be the king of everything, but he can still be a leader in sort of a specific sort of area.
Yeah, like, I kind of feel like I want to lean in the direction of like, because of the vision, they'll have him kind of just sort of find some way to, take on a leadership role going forward. I don't think we'll just really simply just go ahead of like, the elections are all going to go ahead. I think something is going to happen to sort of change the exact details of what's happening. And whether that being like Wu deciding to run in like Ba Sing Se or something like that, just that he wants some sort of a leadership role. I do feel something might change, that, the elections are put on hold for a little bit, so Wu will get like a couple of months as king, and they'll see where they go from there. That this is on the table, but it's maybe not happening right now. because already like we saw that they changed it here to like, oh, it's happening today, and it just feels like, whoa, really? Like we're it's just gonna happen here? We're just gonna end this book and potentially multiple places will have governors or what? Because in a way, like I don't see it being this sort of long-term story happening in the background of just the Earth Kingdom elections just taking place. So I feel like it's probably going to be just one of those things where like it'll maybe be put on hold for a while. We'll eventually get some sort of a time skip in the core comics, and then we'll come back and, oh, it's now happened, or something like that. So again, there's a lot of like, which exact way do they go, which makes the book really interesting, because there's a few different paths they could take to get to this kind of similar type of points. But yeah, that's our kind of final speculation before the release of Runes of the Empire Part 3. Like I said earlier, when the book comes out, we will be doing a full-on review of it. Like we did kind of page-by-page analysis of the preview, we'll just be doing that for the entire book. So we'll do full analysis once everything's kind of done. So yeah, that's coming in like just over 3 weeks. I suppose for the podcast, it'll probably be like 4 weeks before we get to that. But yeah, and at that point, we'll probably also have a lot of the other news we've been waiting for. So, you know, depending on when that news happens, you know, the next podcast might be that review, but it might be just another news podcast covering the Dark Horse reveals, which we're expecting, and if they have anything else maybe surprising for the anniversaries, but we'll see what happens. But yeah, beyond that, that has been episode 208 of the Avatar Online podcast. It's been myself and Greg. Thanks for listening, and bye.
Bye-bye.